Hospitals are built on rhythm. The constant beeping of monitors, the squeak of gurney wheels, the hum of fluorescent lights that never go dark. But deep below that living pulse lies a different world. Quiet, cold, forgotten. The morgue. For most people, it's the end of the story. But for Michael Turner, it was where his story truly began. Michael had worked the night shift for nearly 5 years. He knew every corner of the hospital basement, every echo, every flicker of the unreliable lights, every drip of the old rusted pipes. To him it was routine, predictable, safe even. But on one April night, that sense of safety shattered. It started like any other shift. Midnight had come and gone, the hospital above alive with emergencies, quiet sobs, and the soft shuffle of nurses changing rounds. Down below, Michael swept the sterile tiles, his mop gliding over the floor in practiced rhythm. His radio crackled with the occasional update from security. Minor things, nothing unusual. The morgue smelled faintly of antiseptic and cold steel. Then the lights flickered. Just once, a brief, harmless stutter. He glanced up, muttered to himself, and kept working. The hum of the fluorescent bulb steadied again, filling the air with that familiar electric buzz. He moved toward the wall of storage drawers, the silent chambers that held the dead. Each had a small label, neat handwriting, the final record of a name that would soon fade from memory. One name caught his eye. Anna Williams, age 29. Time of death, 2:34 a.m. He didn't know her. He rarely did. But something about the age, barely older than his late wife, gave him pause. He brushed the thought aside and turned back to his mop. That's when he heard it. A sound so faint he thought he imagined it. A soft tap, metal against metal. He froze. The air felt suddenly heavier, denser. He waited, listening. Another sound, sharper this time, like knuckles against steel. He looked around, half expecting to see someone playing a prank. But the morgue was empty, just rows of drawers and the cold hum of the refrigeration system. He took a step forward, his breath shallow, eyes scanning for movement. The sound came again, 3 distinct knocks. Michael's heart began to race. He forced himself to walk closer. The noise was coming from one of the drawers, drawer number 9. The same one labeled Anna Williams. Probably a pressure shift, he whispered to himself. Could be air escaping. Happens all the time. But the voice in his head sounded unconvinced. He reached out, his gloved fingers trembling slightly, and touched the handle. Cold metal, stillness. He leaned closer. The knocking stopped. He exhaled shakily, a nervous laugh slipping out. "You're losing it, Mike," he muttered. And then, a sharp bang from inside the drawer. He stumbled backward, eyes wide, the mop clattering to the floor. His body wanted to run, but something, curiosity, disbelief, rooted him in place. The handle of drawer 9 twitched, just once, as if something inside was pushing against it. The lights above flickered again, plunging the room into brief darkness before sputtering back to life. Every instinct screamed for him to leave, but he couldn't. Slowly, cautiously, he reached for the small identification tag again. "Anna Williams. Pronounced dead just hours ago," Michael whispered. No, it's not possible." Silence filled the morgue. Long, suffocating silence, and then faintly, one last sound. Not mechanical. Not random. A slow, deliberate knock. 3 beats. He stood frozen, the weight of the impossible pressing on him, the sterile air burning in his lungs. Somewhere in the distance, a generator kicked in, sending a low rumble through the building. But down there, in that dim room of the forgotten, Michael Turner knew something had just changed forever. And as the camera lingers on his face, pale, drenched in cold sweat, the drawer falls silent once more. Before that night, Michael Turner was the kind of man people barely noticed. Quiet, punctual, polite to a fault. He'd show up 15 minutes early to every shift, sip the same burnt coffee from the vending machine, and take comfort in the solitude that came after the hospital's chaos died down. Most nights, he spoke to no one, and that was how he preferred it. 3 years earlier, Michael had lost his wife, Sarah, to cancer. She was 38. The illness had been relentless, and when she died, it took more than her life. It took his sense of meaning. The sounds of her hospital room had never left him. The steady beep of a heart monitor, the way it flatlined into silence. After her passing, he couldn't bear to be around people. The sympathy, the conversations, the pity, all of it felt unbearable. So he took the janitor job at St. Francis Medical Center. The night shift. The quiet hours. It wasn't glamorous, but it was simple, predictable. And most importantly, it didn't require talking about loss. Coworkers described him as steady, reliable, but withdrawn, one nurse said later. He did his work, never complained, but there was always this look in his eyes, like he was somewhere else. Michael found a strange peace in the morgue. It wasn't fear that drew him there. It was familiarity. "The dead don't argue," he once joked to a coworker, forcing a small smile. "They just rest." To him, the morgue was the only place in the hospital untouched by urgency or panic. The living world upstairs was unpredictable, but down there everything was still. He learned to move silently through the hallways to listen rather than speak. He became the unseen presence who swept away the traces of tragedy after everyone else had gone home. The floors gleamed under his care, the rooms left spotless, small acts of control in a world that had taken so much from him. Every now and then, he'd pause by the glass observation window outside the morgue. Beyond it, rows of covered forms lay in motionless repose. He often thought about Sarah, how the body was only a vessel, how the energy of a person must go somewhere after death. It wasn't religion that gave him that thought. It was longing. Maybe if something of her lingered, she wasn't truly gone. Michael didn't talk much about his grief, but it seeped into everything he did. He kept a photograph of her tucked in his locker, smiling, healthy, long before the diagnosis. Sometimes, when his shift ended at dawn, he'd take out the photo and whisper, "Good night, Sarah," before closing the door. To most people, the morgue would be unbearable, but for Michael, it was the only place he could exist without pretending, without answering questions about how he was holding up. He didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't believe in miracles either. But deep down, something in him wanted to. Something still hoped there was more beyond the cold metal tables and toe tags, and that hope, that quiet yearning for connection, would become the thread that pulled him toward the unexplainable. The night he heard that first knock wasn't just a random event. It was the start of something he had unknowingly been waiting for, something that would test the boundaries between grief, reality, and whatever lies beyond death itself. The next night, Michael returned to work trying to convince himself that what he'd heard was nothing more than a trick of the mind. The creak of old machinery, a shift in temperature, a pressure change inside the refrigeration units. That's what the rational part of him said, but the rest of him couldn't stop replaying that sound. The deliberate rhythm of those knocks, the unmistakable sense that someone, not something, had been on the other side of that drawer. He arrived just before midnight. The fluorescent lights hummed as always, casting the same sterile glow. Everything appeared as it should. Still, he hesitated before opening the morgue. Door. The air inside was colder than usual, his breath forming faint clouds in the dim light. For a moment, he simply stood there, listening. Silence. On his desk lay a fresh intake form. Anna Williams, age 29, the same name. Her cause of death, cardiac arrest following sudden collapse at a local gym. No known health issues, no drugs, no trauma. Her body had been transferred earlier that evening. Michael stared at the photo clipped to the report. A smiling young woman, bright eyes, a life that looked nowhere near ready to end. It unsettled him as he worked through his routine, checking the logbook, wiping surfaces, replacing disinfectant bottles. He couldn't help but glance toward drawer 9. Rationally, he knew what death looked like. Bodies twitch, nerves fire randomly. Sometimes air escapes from the lungs, creating strange sounds. He'd seen all of it, but that sound last night had felt aware. Hours passed. The building above him quieted to a distant hum. He was finishing up when it began again, faint but unmistakable. A soft rasping sound, like someone trying to breathe through heavy cloth. He froze. The air thickened. The sound came again, a slow exhale, followed by silence. He turned toward drawer 9. His heart pounded in his ears. "It's just air," he whispered. "Bodies release air. Perfectly normal." He said it again, louder, as if volume could make it true. But then he saw movement. Just a flicker. The faintest twitch beneath the white sheet. He blinked, unsure if it was the trick of the flickering lights. And then, before he could think, one of her fingers moved. Just once. A small, deliberate curl. The mop slipped from his hand, hitting the floor with a sharp clang. He stumbled backward, his pulse racing. He wanted to run, to call for help, but his legs felt locked. The sheet shifted again. A faint gasp broke the silence. Dry, shallow, but real. Michael lunged for the intercom. His voice shook as he called upstairs, demanding immediate assistance. Within moments, 2 doctors and a nurse arrived, pushing through the morgue doors. But when they opened the drawer, Anna lay still, motionless, pale, lips slightly parted. No sound, no breath. They connected her to a portable ECG monitor. The flat line appeared instantly. No pulse, no rhythm, no electrical activity. She was gone. One of the doctors turned to Michael, a hint of pity in his eyes. "It happens sometimes," he said softly. "Nerves, gas. You've been working too many nights, son. Maybe take a break?" Michael nodded numbly. But deep down, he knew what he'd heard, what he'd seen. As they left, the room fell silent again, but not peaceful. It felt like the air itself was waiting, listening. And for the first time, Michael wondered if death could be something other than final. If maybe, somewhere between the living and the gone, something, or someone, still lingered. In the days that followed, Michael couldn't shake what he'd witnessed. Every sound in the morgue seemed amplified. Every creak of the refrigeration unit, every faint hiss of escaping air. Logic told him it was impossible, yet something in him refused to let it go. What if there was an explanation? Not supernatural, but scientific. What if the body wasn't as final as he'd been taught to believe? He began searching online during his breaks, scrolling through medical databases and obscure forums. One term kept appearing again and again: the Lazarus phenomenon. also known as Lazarus syndrome. It described a rare and baffling medical event. Patients who spontaneously regained circulation after being declared dead. No pulse, no heartbeat, no electrical activity. And then suddenly, life again. The first documented case dated back to 1982, and since then there had been fewer than 40 confirmed incidents worldwide. Doctors offered theories: delayed drug effects, trapped air in the chest compressing the heart, electrical misfiring that reignited a heartbeat. But no one could fully explain it. It was as if the body, for reasons no one understood, sometimes decided it wasn't done yet. Michael read about a woman in Spain who woke up inside her own body bag 30 minutes after being pronounced dead. A man in India who revived during his own funeral preparation. The more he read, the colder he felt. It was possible, he realized, that Anna's movements hadn't been his imagination at all. Maybe she hadn't been dead. Not entirely. Doctors interviewed for the documentary spoke calmly but cautiously. One, a cardiologist, explained, "In medicine, we define death as the irreversible cessation of all vital functions. The key word is irreversible. The problem is, we don't always know when that point truly comes." The film cuts between their interviews and Michael sitting alone at his kitchen table, surrounded by papers, medical articles, and the soft glow of his computer screen. His eyes are red, sleepless. He isn't looking for ghosts anymore. He's looking for answers. He even approached one of the hospital physicians, Dr. Patel, who had overseen Anna's post-mortem intake. "Is it possible," Michael asked quietly, "for someone to move after being declared dead?" Dr. Patel sighed. "Yes, but not in the way you think. The human body does strange things after death. Muscles contract, air shifts. It's unsettling, but it's natural." He paused, noticing the worry in Michael's eyes. "Well, whatever you saw, it wasn't her coming back. It was biology, nothing more." But that explanation didn't satisfy him. Biology couldn't explain the gasp, that unmistakable sound of air being drawn in. It couldn't explain how he felt the temperature shift in the room, how every hair on his arm had stood on end. Late one night, Michael replayed an old recording on his phone, an ambient audio clip he'd captured in the morgue weeks earlier to help him fall asleep. He had recorded the hum of the refrigeration units, the rhythmic pulse of the machines. But as he listened now, at the 23-second mark, he heard it. 3 faint knocks, the same pattern, the same rhythm. He sat motionless in his kitchen, the recording looping softly through the speakers. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe it was nothing. But part of him wondered if it was proof. A whisper from the other side of that cold steel door, echoing in a language science still couldn't translate. It had been nearly 3 weeks since the night of Drawer 9, and though the hospital had moved on, Michael hadn't. The memory lived inside him like a quiet infection, always there, always pulsing beneath the surface. He'd stopped sleeping through the day. When he did, he dreamt of that sound, the hollow echo of knuckles on steel. On a cold Thursday evening, he returned to work after a few days off. The morgue felt different somehow. He told himself it was just fatigue, that he was overthinking. But the air felt charged, as if the room itself remembered. The intake that night was David Klein, 58, a retired school teacher who had died from a massive stroke earlier that afternoon. Michael read the file carefully. No irregularities, no medical mystery, just a straightforward tragic death. He logged the information, tagged the body, and placed it in the cooler. Routine. Everything by the book. Around 2 a.m, the hospital grew silent again. That was Michael's favorite hour, when even the night shift nurses took their coffee breaks, and he could pretend he was the only person left in the world. He moved between rooms with his cart, humming softly under his breath. But as he passed the storage wall, something made him stop. There was a sound, faint, muffled, almost like a moan. He froze. It was coming from the direction of the drawers. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "Not again?" He stepped closer. The sound grew slightly louder, clearer now, a low, drawn-out groan followed by something else, a rhythmic tap from inside one of the units. Drawer 6, the one holding David Klein. His rational mind screamed at him to call the nurses immediately, but his body moved on instinct. He approached the drawer slowly, every step deliberate, cautious. As he leaned in, his breath fogged the glass door of the refrigeration unit. For a moment he saw nothing. And then, faintly, he saw it, condensation, forming inside the glass. A slow patch of fog that spread outward, as if someone inside was breathing. Michael stumbled back, heart racing, his mind grasping for logic. Maybe it was a malfunction, heat transfer, a chemical reaction, something mechanical. Anything but what it appeared to be. He ran to the intercom, voice trembling. "Oh, this is Turner. I need someone in the morgue. Now." A few minutes later, the night nurse, Carla, arrived, followed by a resident doctor. They opened the drawer carefully. David's body lay motionless, exactly as before. No condensation, no sound. The doctor placed a stethoscope to his chest, shook his head, and muttered, "Nothing." Carla gave Michael a sympathetic look. "You're exhausted, hon. Maybe take a walk, get some air." But he couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened. something that vanished the moment others entered the room. It was the same pattern, life flickering where there should be none, then gone. The next morning, he was called into the hospital administrator's office. "Michael," the administrator said gently, "a few staff members have expressed concern. You've been working a lot of nights, and maybe you're seeing things that aren't there. We think it's best if you take some time off." He didn't argue. He just nodded. Inside, though, he felt the walls closing in. That night at home, sleep wouldn't come. When he finally drifted off near dawn, he dreamt of the morgue, but it wasn't empty. The drawers were all slightly ajar, and from within each came a voice. Not cries for help, not screams, but whispers. One of them was his wife's. She was calling his name. He jolted awake, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. For a long time, he just sat there, staring at the dark corner of his room where shadows seemed to shift on their own. He didn't know anymore whether he was being haunted by the dead or by his own grief. All he knew was that something in the morgue had changed him. The line between death and life no longer felt solid. It pulsed like something alive, fragile, breathing, waiting. And deep down, he feared it wasn't done with him yet. The storm rolled in without warning, thunder rumbling low over the city, rain hammering the hospital windows like an impatient hand. Michael had been on leave for nearly a month, but that night the phone rang. It was security. A freezer malfunction had triggered an alarm in the morgue, and the on-call technician was stuck across town. They needed someone to check it immediately. For a long moment, he just stared at the phone. Every instinct told him to say no, but something deeper, something he couldn't name, compelled him to go. Within the hour, he was back at St. Francis. The elevator creaked as it descended to the basement. When the doors opened, the familiar chill washed over him, colder than he remembered. The hum of the refrigeration units was uneven, sputtering like a failing heartbeat. He stepped inside, flashlight cutting through the darkness, and then he saw it. One of the drawers hung open, drawer 9. The label, half torn and faded, still bore the name Anna Williams. He froze. For a moment, he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "No," he whispered. "That's not possible." He grabbed the morgue logbook, flipping through the entries, and his stomach dropped. There it was. Anna Williams, deceased, same name. Same age, same cause, cardiac arrest. But the date was recent, just 3 days ago. He flipped back to confirm the earlier record. There it was again, her original entry, months prior. 2 identical names, 2 deaths, same woman. Michael's mind spun. Was it an error? A coincidence? Or something else entirely? He turned toward the open drawer, his light shaking in his hands. Inside lay her body, covered neatly in a white sheet. The tag on her wrist matched the file exactly. He whispered into the cold air, "How can you be here again?" The storm outside intensified, thunder cracking like a shout from heaven. Then the power went out. Total darkness. The silence that followed was unbearable. The kind that presses against your ears until you can hear your own heartbeat. And then, out of that darkness came a sound, soft, faint, a single heartbeat. Thump. Michael held his breath. Another thump. Thump. He turned toward the sound. It was coming from the drawer. He reached out, hand trembling, and slowly peeled back the sheet. The flashlight flickered to life again, and for a fraction of a second he saw her face. Pale, still, lips parted just slightly. Her skin looked less cold, less lifeless. He leaned closer, unable to stop himself. "Anna," he whispered, "if you can hear me." Her hand twitched. Just a little. Then suddenly it clamped around his wrist. Michael gasped, dropping the flashlight. It clattered to the floor, spinning light across the walls in frantic circles. Her grip was weak, but unmistakably human, warm, desperate. He tried to pull away, but she held on, her fingers tightening with impossible strength. The lights flickered back to life, blinding him for a moment. When his eyes adjusted, she was still, her hand limp, no pulse, no movement. He stood there, chest heaving, the echo of her heartbeat still ringing in his ears. Somewhere above, the power fully returned, and the morgue's hum steadied once more. Michael backed away slowly, whispering to no one in particular. She came back. She actually came back. He didn't notice the faint smudge of condensation forming again on the inside of the drawer glass, a slow, rhythmic fog that pulsed in time with something only the dead could feel. Years have passed since that night, and Michael Turner no longer works at St. Francis Hospital. He left quietly, no goodbyes, no explanations. He moved to a small coastal town several hours away, where the sea drowns out most thoughts, and the wind carries the kind of silence he once found underground. He lives alone now in a modest cabin overlooking the water. The locals know him as the quiet man who walks the beach at dawn, always with the same distant look in his eyes. He doesn't talk about what happened. Not to neighbors, not to doctors, not to anyone. But sometimes, when the power flickers during a storm, he catches himself holding his breath, waiting. He says he's not afraid anymore, just humbled. "You spend enough nights surrounded by death," he once said softly, "and you start to understand it's not as permanent as we like to think." In the documentary's final interview, Michael sits by the window, light spilling across his face. His hands shake slightly as he opens a worn leather journal. Inside are pages filled with scrawled notes, dates, times, and sketches of drawers labeled with numbers. At the bottom of one page, underlined twice, are the words, "It happened again." He reads a passage aloud, voice barely above a whisper. "I used to think death was an ending. Now I think it's just a door that sometimes doesn't close all the way." His eyes flicker upward, the faintest trace of fear hidden behind a weary smile. The film cuts to a series of closing reflections. Doctors, ethicists, and medical historians speaking in calm, clinical tones. They explain how the boundary between life and death remains one of medicine's greatest uncertainties. "We define death by what our instruments can no longer detect," one expert says. "But consciousness, whatever it truly is, might linger in ways we still can't measure." As the voices fade, the camera returns to the empty hospital corridors of St. Francis. The walls gleam under dim lights, the sound of distant machinery filling the silence. The elevator dings softly, empty, and the doors slide shut. Then, the shot lingers on the morgue door. Still, closed. A soft hum fills the air, like the low vibration of the refrigeration units beginning their nightly rhythm. For a moment, everything is calm, still, and just as the scene begins to fade to black, a faint knock echoes from behind the steel. 3 slow, deliberate beats. Michael's voice returns, calm, distant, almost reverent. "Sometimes I still hear knocking. Not from the dead, but from whatever part of us refuses to stay silent." The sound fades into silence, and for the first time, that silence feels alive.